A long hiatus, a good respite from the podcasting world. Actually, I've been on a bunch of other podcasts, but I haven't done one of my own in a little while. So it feels good to be back, though. It's kind of nice to take a break from something for a little while and then come back invigorated.
Except the Twitter messages. And people are like, bro, it's been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Dude, it's been a month. You still out there? What's going on?
You alive?
Like, oh.
Yeah, I think I sustained people with just doing enough other podcasts.
That's what I tell. I go, hey, look at this dude, or look at this one. And
yeah.
But man, to do your own, to have that kind of, for me, it's like, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like to go and talk to my friends, and it's cool, like, because it's conversations that I wouldn't normally have. But to go out and be as disciplined, like, I don't really know maybe anybody as disciplined as Joe is about his work ethic and about getting it in regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And he's at a point in his life where he can set his life up like that. But man, he's got he's driven in that regard.
100%. He's one of the most relentlessly energetic people when it comes to that. Yeah. Like, he's drawing from resources. I'm like, where are you getting that from?
Exactly. I mean, well, and it's a self-loathing in a way. It's part of it. Like, I am not very happy with what it's like, that thing. I think that people that are highly successful or on their way there, they're always looking at, like, where are the burrs on me that I need to brush off, and how do I polish this vessel to become better and better? And he's in that in such a hypertrophied state, if that's a way to say it, like that. I don't see anybody like that.
It's an inspiration. But I think, both of us kind of fall in that category as well. Yeah. And I've been reflecting on that recently is, I really can look back at just this relentless pursuit of optimization, my whole life, and just always trying to optimize myself, my life experience, the enjoyment I get out of things, the depth of experience that I get, just relentless, optimizing to the point where it's creating suffering half the time,
right?
And then requiring like recovery on the other side as well, because all of this growth and all of this pushing forward, that one thing that people forget, you get it when it's athletics, like you get it in the gym. Oh yeah, hard workout. I need my recovery. I need my rest. But it's the same thing for the psyche and the emotions and all of this other stuff.
Especially the more people you're around.
For sure.
Like, I think about that with friends that are massage therapists, and that's energy that they're taking in, or tattoo artists. Like, I look at that kind of stuff and I'm like, that is a hard job, because you're really with somebody. A lot of places we get buffered, but like, it's people's energy that either enhance or detract from us in a way, and we only have so much to give. And I guess for me is like, it's finding that balance. Like the lapses in my podcast are that for sure. Of like, I just got like, or I'm like, I get it. I get these weird jobs, and then I'm on set for 16 hours a day, and then I'm going to sleep for 6 hours, and then I'm going to go work again. I just don't have. There's literally not time. And, But
no, I get that. And I think that's one of the roles that like a good healer or a shaman plays, because they're actually drawing the worst shit out of people constantly. So if they're not careful, well, they have, part of their practice is how to clear it out of their own body. Yeah. So like one of the things that you have to have, if you're just going to take that all on yourself, right, and not able to move it back out, you're going to get crushed. You're going to get sick. You're going to get crushed. So a lot of people with big hearts who want to do that, who are good at drawing out that energy, if you're not good at taking that on and moving it out, you're going to get sick and you're going to get fucked up. So the great ones always have their ways of just clearing all that stuff. I mean, there's so much that happens behind the scenes of like this materialist reductionist viewpoint of, well, did a germ transmit, or did was your body, did lactic acid build? You're
we fall into science so much,
right?
Not that that's not great, but then we negate this whole other aspect,
energetics,
which is huge, which we don't really understand.
And I think that'll become scientific when our tools get better and our understanding get better. It's not that it's not science. It's just that we can't detect it yet. It's like we're in a world, like the Wi-Fi example is great. We're in a world that has Wi-Fi, and we just don't have any fucking internet or routers or things to figure it out yet.
Right. It's like 100 years ago, I shine a flashlight at you. Yeah. I'm a witch, and I get burned at the stake. Right. Just 100 years ago, not very long ago.
I think the mustache would qualify you, actually.
It's true.
For getting burned.
Or some kind of deity.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I think I might have seen you in Thailand, floating on a cloud, wielding a giant
with 8 arms,
8 arms and a mace somewhere.
I think that thing about athletics too, like you said, that the first thing that you find, because we don't learn to intellectually push ourselves really until you have to be disciplined and dialed into a certain point to be able to do that endeavor, I think, to become frustrated over problems and overcome them, and maybe little bits as a kid, but like in athletics that really translates because it's such a brutish kind of experience in a way. It's very physical, like we can feel that, and it's viscous, and we always disregard recovery in that. We always think if we work, Keith and I would talk about this all the time. If we'd work harder, like what do you need to do if you lost? Well, you need to work harder. And that's it. And then you're grinding steel on steel, and there's no recovery. There's no joy. There's no freshness. It's like some of those guys that I see that, like Johnny Hendricks, I always think about, like, he's never in super duper the best shape, but he fights happy as anything. Yeah. And it's like there's something about that, like low stress kind of.
That's a lesson I learned from my really good friend, Bodie Miller, who's one of the most decorated skiers in history. And for him, everybody always bitched about his partying and like, you should work harder, bro. You gotta. And he was the type of guy, like, he would in his off season, I mean, he was off, like really off. And even in season, he would take his time and go out and have drinks and do that. And people would criticize him for that, but they didn't know him. They didn't know that if he didn't do that, he would loathe skiing.
Right.
And he would not put the passion into doing it. He would not have the fire in his belly. He wouldn't care anymore. So he would suck.
Yeah.
So all the advice, all this pressure from the world, if he would have listened, he would have sucked. He would have never won any medals. He would have never done anything. For him, he had to have those moments where he could just break out and be himself and be free, so he didn't get burned out and just not care anymore. And
makes
I think
so much sense.
Yeah, and there's so many counter pressures that you got to be aware of too. Like, you got to really know yourself and really trust, like,
and that's a
what's
changing
best.
vessel.
Yep.
Also, you got to be able to not only know, there is no absolute knowing. You got to be able to ride the wave of the different selves that show up throughout the week or day.
Very wise. Very wise, because you're not the same person on any given day. You're completely different.
You get news later this afternoon, stuff changes. And it changes, like, in your endocrine system, it changes in your hormonal level, it changes. Like, if you get gutted by some news, that changes you. That literally changes you.
And then people's expectations of what you are always applying this constant pressure.
To cut out that kind of pressure, to cut out, like I always tell dudes that, I'm like, don't go on the internet, don't go on Twitter. You don't want to see that, like, before you compete or something like that.
Yeah.
That's tough, man. Like, unless you really have dominion over yourself. I was listening to a guy, is it Derek Sievers, and he was talking about, like, what he thought of as success, and what it came to really was dominion over his mind and his body and his self, so that he could be the most useful, to be able to be the most helpful, and that kind of a thing, and to really, I think, like, whatever you are coaching, I think everybody that's a leader takes on that role as a coach in some way, to know what everybody's goals are, and so what is that success? What would that look like for you? And then to identify that and move on from there, because we can't get anywhere if we don't know that. And that thing about skiing, I mean, it's like what's his name, Phelps, the most decorated gold medalist ever, and people are like, that guy cleaned up his diet. He could really do something. It's like, maybe he's the most winning gold medalist ever.
Yeah, maybe you don't need to give him advice. Maybe he's got it figured out in his own way.
And also what he extracts. Like with your friend Bodie, I think about that too. And I go, we can go to the gym, and then I can sit there and text on my phone the whole time while you're sweating. We're going to get different results, but we both gone to the gym.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or what I eat afterwards. If you eat, a nice protein shake and everything here, and I go down to Taco Bell, we're going to get different results from that. If you sleep well that night, and we're going to get. So our gym experience over the course of a year is going to look really different. You're going to have one result, and I'm going to have a complete. And so
that was his natural counterbalance.
Right.
Obviously, you haven't met him, but his counterbalance was when he was working out.
He was getting every ounce of juice.
He would push himself so much harder than any human being I've ever seen. Like, pushing anabolic thresholds, pushing anaerobic thresholds, pushing these things, so that he could perform at a peak. Like, I mean, regularly driving himself, a pro athlete, to the point of complete exhaustion and vomit on a sprint.
Yep.
But being aware that you can't do 100 of those. He doesn't want to get fucking rhabdo or something stupid like that. But when he's in it, all the way.
And that's the thing about those athletes that you're talking about, I think, is the ability to extract the most juice out of that berry. Like, whereas, like, I'm going to get 40% of it or whatever, he's going to get 98% of it.
Yeah.
And he's going to need to counterbalance that that other extra percentiles into that way where I should work harder or whatever the conversation is. But people, we're just too arrogant to be able to understand that, I think, because we go, I could do that. You know what I mean? It's like you look at that and you're like, why would you think that? Like all this, like I've been looking at that a bunch about people with this tremendous confidence, and I look and I go, wow, that guy must be really about it. Like he's awesome. Like, and then I'm like, I look at him, I read about the history, I talk to him, and I'm like, he doesn't know anything. All he is confident with zero merit. Like, and I look at that, and it's a weird thing, and it's almost like innate in some people. I think that there's this idea that if you're like the fake it till you make it is great in some regards, but God damn it, like I think that you like. To get into that excellence is a whole different kind of conversation. That
there's a humility that comes with excellence. You know? And that's like, if I'm going to identify a champion, if you put me in a room full of, some champions and some not, and it's a social experiment, and we're talking about ping pong or whatever, it's the humblest motherfucker that's going to be the champion 9 out of 10 times. It's like with fighters too, when you're around fighters, it's super rare, the absolute exception where you get someone chippy, they're so mellow. And it's just like Tim Kennedy. We were just talking about that. You went through his sheepdog training. One of the baddest humans on the planet. I mean, first draft pick for any zombie apocalypse.
I would
for
say
sure. Worldwide,
arguably,
first draft pick.
I was talking to Stephen Duty, and he's doing some stuff in New York right now, and he's like, well, how was it? Because he's super excited about it. And this thing is called sheepdogresponse.com. You can find out about it. But Tim put on this thing. I just looked at it on Facebook, and he's like, posts one night, and he says, okay, we're doing this sheepdog response. If there's active shooters in the area, I'm like, I'm in. Let's do that. And I was telling Steve, he's like, what do you think about it? I go, I think that Tim Kennedy is the most dangerous man that's walking the planet. And I think that on all levels, because you look at something like that, and we're doing like handgun retention and knife retention and disarms and this and that, and like, oh, that's great, and I'm good at that. Mm-hmm. And then we go to the course and we're shooting, and we're not even really moving very fast and shooting or anything like that, and he is goddamn flawless. I mean, that's a small section of the shooting and the taste that I got. I mean, it's just with a handgun and it's at certain ranges and all that, but he's so adept everywhere, and whether it's sniping, rappelling, swimming, like he's just his broadness of his skill set is so huge, and he's at the cutting edge on the spear tip. So when it came up, I was like, yeah, I want to learn how to be better from the very best guy in the world, please. But then you meet Tim Kennedy, and he's wearing silly, friendly shorts. Seersuckers. They were like pink or red seersuckers.
Friendly shorts. He's got a big jovial smile on his face, and he's like the most lovable guy out there in the room. He really he can get feisty and fired up in the gym and talk some shit, of course. He's a regular dude, but there's no edge. Tim's not trying to prove to anybody that he can kick their ass.
He's got full confidence.
Full confidence. And that's what you find in champions.
In what real confidence is.
Real confidence.
Yeah, true confidence.
Yeah, it's no longer a need to project anything onto anybody else so that you have a reflection of yourself in a certain way. I think so many people look to other people or social media for a reflection of who they are. That's true. But when you've actually put in that amount of time and that much work, you have a little rock. Yeah. You have like a foundational rock.
Confidence through discipline, right?
Yeah, and it's this thing that is there that a million people could come on social media and say, Tim, you're a pussy. A million.
Can you imagine?
And he would just look at it like, wow, there's a funny thing going on in the world right now, but because his rock is so solid.
I wonder what they think pussy means.
Yeah, I mean, you have to question all other aspects of the semantics.
This is a third language they're speaking.
You built a rock, and I think that's, if I had to give people any fundamental advice, it's like, go build your rock. Find out that foundational thing about yourself. And for me, sports are a great way to do that. You find out things about what you're made of.
What was the first thing that turned you on to where you're like, this is the thing?
Man, I think when I think obviously sports have been a great test and a challenge, but I've known that when a situation gets tough, I'll show up. And I've learned that like in a variety of situations. It became crystal clear in one particular ayahuasca session, which was this grueling series of 4 sessions. And at the end of the fourth, I was just done. I was just depleted. I also didn't know it too. I was like really suffering from a bad candida.
When you say done, you're depleted physically,
so
like you're
physically,
sick,
mentally, psychically,
emotionally tired,
so
everything.
On the physical level, I was suffering from a really bad candida overgrowth in my stomach, but I didn't know it. Okay. So I wasn't digesting food right.
How do you get that?
That's I had chronic strep throat as a kid, and so overuse of antibiotics, and then antibiotics before the trip, and then we had this girl from Switzerland who brought a bunch of chocolates, and the combination of the chocolates with the antibiotics, and then all of a sudden I had this I didn't know that at the time. So physically I was super depleted. Ayahuasca is super heavy and psychically depleting anyways. And this particular series was like really grueling, just showing me deeper, hunting my shadows. And so I get to the fourth session and I'm just at like, I didn't want to drink the cup. Like the last thing I wanted to do was take more ayahuasca. I had like no vital energy left.
How much time is between the previous cup and this next cup?
So there's a full day of recovery, and
you're sleeping during that time, or you're just wandering around?
Not the night of the session. So
is it like Night of the Living Zombies? What are people just starting?
Well, some people are. It depends. Like you can wake up after the first session. I was invigorated, refreshed, full of energy, felt cleansed. But I think because of my physical limitations going in, it's like working out when you're sick. You know, like you're not recovering properly.
Yeah, there's a 30% chance you get way better. You're like, ooh, that knocked the cold right out. And then you get pneumonia.
Totally. So I was on that kind of declining curve. And it just depends. And it depends also on the brew. Some brews are really heavy and some brews are much lighter. That's
the part that seems weird to me, is because there's not like, oh, there's 30% of this and 40%. It's like, this is a guy in the woods that's dumping stuff into a boiling pot of water and going, yeah, have at it.
But it's like, in most cases, it's like 1,000-year-old recipe, grandfather to son, passed along.
How do they know? I guess it's because it's a chemical compound. Right. I was going to liken it to like green chili in the Rio Grande Valley. And like that's, but some parts are hot. Like, and you're like, oh, well, this was a hot batch this year. This one's like not as hot.
Sauce,
and so how do you know how strong that shit is? You know, are there varying strengths depending on the plant?
There are, but they're in constant communication with the plants, both from like on an energetic level and a consumption level. Yeah. So, anyways, the lightest brews are going to be basically chacruna leaf, which is NN-DMT, which is a very like light form of DMT. It's what you usually smoke if you're smoking from like Mimosa hostilis or one of these other barks. Very light kind of visual DMT. And then there's different types of ayahuasca. There's black ayahuasca, yellow ayahuasca variety. So, and some are heavier than others, right? So Don Howard, the guy who I was drinking with, chose not only the heaviest form of the ayahuasca, cascavel, which is like viper, means viper. So it's like the strongest form.
Don's a go-getter.
Plus, he not only had chacruna, but he had wambisa, opayahe, a variety of different other plants that have 5-MeO-DMT, bufotenine, other active compounds that are really a lot heavier.
Now, why mix that up like that?
Well, everything has a different design. This is designed to go to the deepest levels, like the deepest levels of healing, the deepest purge possible. And he likes to wring stuff out from the spine, not just, clean off this, not just squeegee off the skin.
To me because, when you mix, like, there's got to be synergistic effects and that are kind of unknowns, maybe even.
Unknowns, but practiced unknowns, they've been doing it for so long that it becomes, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people going through these rituals. They've drunk ayahuasca themselves over 2,000 times, so that kind of experience leads to a knowledge, and they understand what compounds are in there.
Do they do testing on that of whether like their brains are actually physically stronger or diminished, or do they know what happens? Are there tests like that with DMT?
Not any long-term studies that I'm aware of. But that would be an interesting thing to go. But these dudes are pretty fucking illegal. Sharp.
It's so shitty because you can't test anything.
Like being around fighters, you can tell when someone's getting a little punchy, and these shamans are not on that. Not on that road.
Anyway, I digress.
So no worries. I think that's probably information people want. So I'm taking this really heavy brew, and fourth session, I don't want to drink it. Everything in my body is saying, like, please don't drink this. The shaman comes up to me and he says, he comes up and he just knows the right thing to say. And he says, the warrior's heart beats as one heart. And I'm looking around. I got all my brothers and sisters there who I brought on the trip. And I'm like, fuck, I can't sit this one out. The Warriors' heart beats as one heart. If they're stepping up to do this, I'm going to step up to do this too. So I drink a full cup. And it just takes me down to the depths of I had absolutely nothing more to give. And then ayahuasca will start compounding these things, and really pushing me, because it wanted me to reach this breaking point, was what I later was able to see. But it pushed me to this point where I was not only surrendered to my death, which I'd done before. So, okay, I'm going to die. Fine. No problem. It not only said that, it said, not only are you going to die, you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter. You're water borrowed from the ocean, and the ocean forgot. You're less than nothing. You're the gum on nothing's shoe. You don't matter at all. And at that point, it was just this total release of all my specialness, everything that I held myself to be, not only in this life, but in the eternal, this, soul that was coming to cause positive change, all these things that I thought about myself, all of it was just released. And I just curled up on the ground and was just sobbing these soft, pitiful tears of nothingness, not even manly crying, just I'm nothing. And then I just heard my grandmother's voice come through, and I have a really close kind of spiritual relationship with my grandmother who passed. She's like, Aubrey, get up. Get up. And I was like, Grandma, I can't get up. I can't get up. And she's like, Aubrey, get up. You're not done here. And then right from that moment, it's just something clicked. At my very depth, when I had absolutely no resources, nothing there, and I was like, all right, I'll fight. I'll get up. I'll fight. I'll fight with whatever I got. And I just fucking sat up and just decided right then that no matter what happened, no matter how low I got, no matter what the world did, no matter what the universe did, I'd fight to my last breath for the good of all. Para el bien de todos, as I say. And that moment was probably one of the most crucial moments in my life, because I'd never been that low. I'd never felt that bad before. I've never had less to draw on, less resources. And, granted, I got a little help from my grandma there, but knowing then that even at that lowest point, I'd still answer the call, answer the call to show up. Mm-hmm. I learned a little something about myself, a little rock that I could build from, for sure. All right, no matter what happens, no matter how low it gets, no matter how bad it gets, when it's time to answer the call, I'll answer the call. And that thing was the first thing that I think I really ever knew about myself, because you think things about yourself. Yeah, I'm a good person. I do this thing. Right. You think, but not until it's
what would I do in this situation?
What would I do in this?
I would do this. I'm how could you know?
Exactly. How do you know what you would do? And then, but just knowing that, I think, was really valuable. And I had inclinations from other tough experiences, but nothing was like this. And again, people might say, oh, bro, you just took ayahuasca. It's not that hard. That's the thing about these things. It can get to this really deep levels, because it's taking your psyche to that absolute point, mimicking what it would be like if you had to experience that in the physical fight for your life, So that was a really powerful moment, because that gave me this confidence to build from. All right, I will show up. I will show up when called. And then you can start adding some other things on top of that, right, and it's layer it, and it becomes solid. But I think for a lot of people, they don't really know
so that's
anything.
Like a bedrock for you.
The bedrock.
Yeah.
But if you don't know anything, you're just waffling in the breeze. You're just looking at other people's opinion.
Right.
Well, I have this girlfriend. This must mean that I'm attractive. Or I have this job. This must mean I'm successful. Look, I post this photo and I get this many likes. Right. This must mean I'm cool. So you start using all these external things because you haven't built that fundamental thing.
Trip, that changes the world, right? You think about being a youngster. Mm-hmm. That changes things.
Yeah.
And then finding out what kind of attention am I seeking, and all, that's a whole different kind of trip.
Right. It's challenging as fuck now.
It's a trip, man.
It's a really challenging time.
And they talk about, the first thing I started thinking of that, I'm like, ooh, kids are fucked. Is that everything is on the internet, and I was reading that Chris's book Sex at Dawn, and it talk about imprinting sexuality and whatever his quirks are. I'm like, why does this guy love to dress up in rubber? Or why does this girl love to have a horsetail out of her ass? Or whatever the thing is, right? Everybody's got all these different quirks. Even if it's I only like romantic lovemaking or whatever, that's a quirk. That's your thing. Whatever it is that your thing is. And And then you start hearing about some people. You're like, I can only come if somebody pees on my head. And I'm like, I'm so glad I've got my quirks and not that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So cleanup sounds horrible. But like you think of those imprints and go, okay, so that comes. I remember I was at a nightclub and I was working the door with this guy. And he was an older dude. And he's like, man, he was pissed. He was like, all these girls out here with their shaved pussies. He says, I just can't. He's like, it's like, I don't like it at all. I go, what do you like? He's like, I like a big, thick, furry bush. And I go, oh. I'm like, don't you ever get one in your throat? Like, that's horrible. And he goes, no, man. I go, why is that, do you think? Because I'm looking at it. I'm like, you're like a medical curiosity, sir. Like, and he says, the first thing I ever saw was a penthouse with a girl at a floor-to-ceiling window, and her hands are up on it, and her back is arched out, and it's a photograph taken from down low up high, and all you could see is the bush underneath. And he's like, and that's the real first like sexual image that I saw. So I'm reading Chris's book, and then I think about that, and I'm like, that's what it like. So what you first see, point being scared about the kids.
Yeah.
You're seeing a horse fuck some guy to death. All of a sudden, shit changes for you forever.
And not only do you have that exposure, which we never had. I mean, we snuck Playboys and penthouses,
and you had to be creative about it.
And fucking
just grab your phone.
Yeah, no. And it wasn't that kind of variety. You couldn't go down rabbit holes. If you were like,
no rabbit holes.
The first time I saw anal sex, I was like, oh my God, this is really interesting.
The first time I
wasn't able to find it again for like a year. Like, I don't know where to find that stuff.
I don't know if I was watching Porky's or what, but we were maybe 9 or 10 years old, and we were behind. There's a fence around the drive-in theater by my town, and we're watching, and there's a guy having sex from behind, and that was the conversation that me and these two brothers, Jeff and Joel Bauer, are having. We're like, is that in her ass or is that her pussy? What? Like, we didn't, and we're like, we just made it up and decided to agree on it. We had no idea. For sure, we're not seeing anal sex in an R-rated film. We just had no clue, though. We just heard the term.
Yeah,
it's a trip.
And then, all right, so you have that exposure where you can go down any rabbit hole. And then you have the absolute void of any conscious education on the other side. Like, everybody else is just like, yeah, nope, it's not happening. Like, no institutions are coming in saying, well, either kids are going to learn entirely from porn, or we can start teaching them some actual useful information. You know, like, at least to counteract that. And I think we're in this weird time right now where we have all that porn and all that stuff, but we haven't taken any counteractive measures. Yeah. So this generation has probably the most challenging thing, because you should be learning about like how to like interact in that sexual space in a positive way, because you're going to look at porn anyway. So at least have this like, in every space. Really? But that's one of the taboos that we have, that we have out there.
Or you look at the problems with food and all that, and that what goes on. And I remember the first time I took a CrossFit certification 10 years ago, and I thought, God damn, why aren't they teaching this? This is like movement patterns and conscious eating that is like a training manual for your body, how to keep my body healthy. Why isn't that in phys ed classes or whatever? But you can't change those structures, even if they're broken, even if they're giving you bad ideas. Like, it's a phenomenal aspect where we have all this information, but we don't utilize it for the best, yet we're tricked and kind of lulled into the idea that the government and the FDA and whomever has your best interest in mind. Right. And they most certainly don't, which is wild.
Yeah, I mean, what the whole school and educational system is really pretty broken, and I think fortunately the internet is now supplanting that as a primary source of information, but that's like trying to gather useful bits out of a fire hose. I mean,
and also it's like, where does it route you? I mean, most of the places we go on the internet is Facebook.
Right.
I mean, and so we have automatic routes, but then there's all these other things. I mean, with search engine optimizations and everything like that, governments and large corporations control that. So if you search right now, for is a sugar substitute deleterious to your body? Is it cancer causing? You'll have FDA links and all that in the first 4 pages that come up that say it's fine. There's no big deal. And then when you get to page 8 or something, it'll be David Icke, and then somebody from a holistic place that's like, yeah, it causes cancer. We know it does. Yeah. And so you're with the crazies, right? And so it's like that becomes information that people go, oh, well, that's crazy. Like, it's a wild thing. We're not taught to think or discern very much.
Yeah, and I think that should be one of the primary things being taught is like, now there's all this information out there. Like, how do you track the truth? Like, what methods, What methods are you using? Like, how is it? And so I think there's been a reaction. There's been this kind of skeptical reaction, which I think is good and it's healthy, but then skepticism becomes a religion as well.
Sure.
That excludes all new stuff. It's just only the known is acceptable. Everything else in your woo-woo and it's fucking
Well, and then there's all the stuff that, I mean, I don't know, a dude put it to me and he's like, here's all the stuff that you know. And then there's all the stuff that you don't know. But then there's all this stuff that you don't even know that you don't know. You don't even know that there is something to know there. Like, that's like a magic land, like where you're just oblivious and you can be arrogant in that way just because you're not even aware. Like, it's that thing about raising awareness, I think, that's the hugest aspect of life as I grow, is continually taking layers off and becoming more and more aware, whether it's of surroundings or whether it's of stuff like that, and just trying to raise the bar. I just put everything through the test and I go, is it performance or function oriented? Right. And if it's not, I don't really have time for it. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And so, like, I don't care if it's colored red or blue, like, or, if it's from a conservative or liberal, or if it's got function and performance to a good, desirable end, I'm into it, man. That's kind of my litmus test, I guess.
Sure. So, Tait, if you had to go back and talk to your slightly younger self, give your younger self some advice from what you know now, what would you go back and tell young Tait?
Well, truly, I think the thing is don't be so concerned with what other people think. And that's a really super trite answer, but I look at all the places where I half-stepped a little bit instead of stepping fully and boldly, and that would have made differences. Now, I look at all this stuff, and I'll tell you this predicated with the idea that without any of my failures or any of my missteps, I wouldn't end up where I am, which I'm super stoked about. However, there is that, you always wonder how you could shine that to a better end. And I don't know. I think that's it, is that live fully. I think that the 100% rule, I think is a good rule, is that it's like being committed is, so important, and being committed in every moment into whatever you're doing in that moment and being present in that moment. And, I get that through wrestling, I think, is one of the biggest aspects. Like, you can teach distance, you can teach levels, you can teach all kinds of things to make a double leg happen, but you can't really teach commitment and follow through. And like, if you don't have 100% commitment, you're not going to be very successful with that. And I think that's the same thing, whether it's related to relationships or to business or to enjoying a meal. It's kind of like that goes into everything. It's like being 100% present with where you are.
Yeah, that's absolutely probably the same advice that I would give myself. And probably right? 15 years from now, the same advice that I would give myself right now is just to be present. Yeah. It's such a lure to, think about things in the past or think about things coming up in the future.
Right.
Which really takes you out of the enjoyment
of the current experience. Or if I had this shiny thing, or if I had, and it's like, well, if that's the idea, then my thinking's broken.
Yeah. Because
the novelty of this thing wears off, and the shine, and then I'm just on to the next thing, and then I don't. So I feel like it's a robbery of appreciation in a way, a self-robbery.
And people think that they won't. It's not saying don't have goals. Just be wandering around in the forest,
right.
But enjoy that everything is processed. There is no destination. There's only one destination for all of us, and that's the other side, whatever that may be.
And that's another huge thing, is that don't get hung up on death so much. I haven't really cared. I've kind of sought it out my whole life, but I'm not super interested with this idea that it's a dark, horrible place to be. Like,
definitely not.
We get into this discussion, and it's not all cultures are like that, where death is like this specter. It's just that's part of the whole deal with life, is that we
have a very juvenile concept of death as a culture.
And I only think it's that way because I'm like, I can't get my head around it in the way that other people think about it. I'm like, that just doesn't seem right to me. Like, it doesn't make sense in my construct.
Yeah, and for me, it's more experiential. I had no idea until, for me, the plant medicines have shown me things that I know, and I don't expect other people to believe me. I expect them to go figure it out for themselves. But for me, I know what that other side feels like. I know what it's like when you're out of the confines of this body and this experience. I don't know it exactly, but I have a pretty damn good taste of what that is, and it's beautiful. It feels like home.
Yeah, I think that's what being in a 100% present moment is like in a lot of ways. It's like
it is, and that's embodying that same consciousness here now, like in our being. And so the practices that I've kind of moved a little bit away from the plants and have started trying to figure out how to do other practices to get me more like in my body.
Such as what?
Because, well, one of the things I've been doing is ecstatic dance.
What does that mean?
So
where you're just flailing around and you're kind of right? Yeah.
So
like a whirling dervish type thing.
Yeah, you just basically surrender.
That's a real religion.
Yeah, whirling dervish. Yeah,
the dervishes. Yeah.
You really surrender to movement and place all your focus on the movement, because with the plants you're accessing consciousness, but it's almost like you're projecting out and like leaving the body,
looking at a movie screen?
Like leaving the body to just kind of hang out while you experience consciousness somewhere else.
Are you watching a movie screen from that place?
You're in the movie screen, but you're still like not your full body is like your body's just kind of like in a very comfortable rested position, either sitting very comfortably.
It's like you're a hologram that R2-D2 is expressing of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right. But then with dance, which is really a form of meditation, like all meditation, you focus on some particular thing so that your mind can calm down. Your mind has to have some kind of thing to focus on in general. You know, like Vipassana, you focus on your breath. Open focus, you focus on empty space. All these other things, you have this focal point. Chanting, you focus on the chanting. Well, dance actually brings that consciousness all the way through your whole body. So you're just focusing on the sensation of your body in movement. And to me, that's like one of the coolest ways to do it, because it brings the presentness like all the way from your fucking feet like to the top of your head. So instead of just experience it elsewhere, you can experience it somatically. And so that's something that I'm really like pretty into right now and playing with a lot. And that's what, I mean, cultures have been doing it for thousands of years. These dances around different sun dance and ghost dance and these ritual dances throughout history. And I think it's one of the reasons why we recreationally do it so much, is because it's an expression of presentness throughout the whole body. But the problem is that so much judgment has been cast upon it. You know, like it's become a performance art, and then the performance anxiety, you know, takes over.
Right.
And for men too, there's this weird homophobia with how you move. Yeah. So not only like am I not going to be good at it, but if I move this way, it definitely means I suck cock.
Right.
You know, or if I use my arms, it definitely means you know. And we have
then
all
those guys that can move their hips like that, though. You go somewhere and all the girls want to fuck those guys. They all want to dance, and then you're standing there with your fucking arms crossed going, I should know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing, though, being a little kid. I don't know, like growing up, it's like if you're a boy, you're supposed to know how to fight. You're supposed to know martial arts. You're supposed to be born with that. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to not cry. You're supposed to know how to dance like Cary Grant.
Yeah.
You're supposed to know all these things. And then it comes up in your life when you don't know those things, and so you're left with two choices. I learn them, which is tough, or I pretend.
Yeah.
And like motherfuckers do that until they're dead. Like you see, and that's why I think
or they just decide that no, that thing's useless.
Or it's gay.
Or it's gay. Yeah.
You know, that's what they do with jiu-jitsu all the time. Like they, you know, you get finished by a guy that's 100 pounds lighter than you 5 times in a minute, and you're like, oh, rolling around with dudes on the floor, not for me, dude. Thanks. I like girls or whatever. It's like, or you get fascinated. You're like, how do you move your body like that to do that? I need to know more about that. You know?
Yeah.
That's what I asked. Like, what was the one discipline that you really looked to? Because I feel like, you know, when you're talking about fighters or about, you know, jet pilots or whomever, it doesn't matter what the thing is. It just matters that you do the thing. Mm-hmm. Like if it's going to yoga every morning for 20 minutes or you take your dog for a walk every day at 7, it's like something about punctuality and doing the thing at a prescribed time. It transcends into the rest of your life. And if you get excellent at whatever the thing is, whether it's jiu-jitsu or cello or archery or whatever, you can speak about that excellence to everybody else with a sense of commonness and humility that is transcendent of the things being different. It's like you have a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
And you know what it takes then, I think, to achieve excellence in that way. And that's a hugely important thing.
That's what I always say when people ask, you know, like...
Because we think it's magic. We look at Tim Kennedy. I was saying to everybody, they're like, well, what do you think the takeaway is here, or whatever. And Tim had just gotten done talking about like, well, I grapple here, and then I work out with Juan in the afternoon on it, and then I'll go and I'll do kickboxing at night, and then I'll do yoga the next morning, and then I go in and I do no-gi grappling. And he goes through this whole thing about what his whole day is, you know, and that's with kids and with working a few different jobs. And I go, I think the takeaway here is that everybody's looking in the room and they're looking at the superhero American Tim Kennedy, which he is. And they think, well, yeah, it's easy for him.
Right.
After he just explains the arduous schedule that he is disciplined to every day of every week of every year. And that's a phenomenal thing. And you start exacting that discipline just for 10 minutes. I do this every day. That grows. And then you can get excellent, and then you can carry more weight. It's like, how do you run on it? Yeah. Like, you get this little idea. You're like, oh, I'm doing sales over here, and then I got this idea. I'm going to do this. How do you do that? Where do I even get jars to put these Alpha Brains in? Where do I, like, all that shit? Fuck, I got to design a label? Like, can I use a Sharpie? Like, you know, you go through all this thing, and then the next thing you know, you get this fucking huge corporate endeavor that's got all these different fingerlings all over, and you couldn't possibly have carried the weight of that if you walked in. But you learn by learning through all the little details, and you get excellent at those details, and then kaboom, it looks flawless. You got to get used to carrying the weight.
Yeah. I think I posted something online the other day, and I, cruised through the comments and try to respond to people, and it was just, I was being very honest about, challenges and resistance.
How are the comments for you? Are they hard or
generally? Generally they're pretty good, and obviously there's a contingent of people who are, detractors. But
do you block them right away?
No, I never block them.
Really?
Only when they're like really saying things. I'll block them if they're talking shit to other commenters.
Yeah.
Not to me.
If you're mean.
If you're mean to other people.
Yeah, if you're mean to my friends. If you say something mean about another fighter or somebody online, you're done.
Yeah.
Bye.
But for me, coming at me, like, I think it's actually a healthy practice for me to like take that, accept it, receive it, and see if there's anything I can learn from it, see how my response is to it. So I take that, kind of as a form of resistance in itself, and look to overcome that. But it can get tough. I mean, it can bring me down. Sometimes I don't respond to it well internally. I've learned not to respond externally until I get my internals correct, because I made that fucking mistake.
That's a huge discipline in itself.
I totally blew that. Like the first time I encountered like serious hate, like firing stuff.
You're like,
back.
Why would they even say this?
I was all bent out of shape.
Yeah.
But so I kind of take it as my form of resistance. But anyway, so I'm going through and I see this comment, and it says, "This incarnation has been easy for you, bro." And I look at it and, I just kind of smile and say, there really is no way that you can say that to anybody. Like, you have no idea what anybody, no matter where they are, have gone through, and yes, am I very blessed? 100%. Am I very grateful for my life? 100%. But unless you've walked in that person's shoes and seen their life, you don't know what's been easy or not.
And the weight you carry that's got veracity. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, my mom's best friend, and she had cancer, and she had cancer for maybe 7 years of chemo and radiation, which I cannot imagine the horror that is. Mm-hmm. And she's still alive today, like, which is rad. But and not sick, for all these years. But I was a little kid. My mom told me the story later, and she goes, Ann comes over and is bald and just out of radiation, and says, "Oh, how's your day, Kelly? What's going on?" And she goes, "Oh, the kids, and then Steven, and then and goes into this whole thing. And I had to go to the cleaners and get groceries today. And then, Tait threw up on the shoes or whatever it is that happened, right?" And then she goes, "God, Ann." And she looks at Ann and she sees her in her state, and she goes, "I've got nothing to complain about. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this to you. I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed and ashamed a little bit." And she goes, "Whatever the trouble is your trouble. It's just as it's the same as mine. Nobody has more pain or more hurt than somebody else. What it is for you is what it is.
Right.
And you can't really deny that. Just because I have to get used to what this weight is doesn't mean that the weight that you've got is any less in any kind of fashion. I mean, it's an interesting thing in that way, the way the universe works.
Very much. And it's just how you deal with this resistance, and I think all of us have this. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Right.
And if you're not if you haven't patterned dealing with resistance, you're going to be in trouble when it actually comes. If you're too soft already and been sheltered from resistance too much, when resistance
don't even think of it.
Inevitably comes, watch out, you know, and that's why I think, it'll always come. It's like we live in this universe, like it's a video game that we're all playing, and there's plenty of bosses and plenty of monsters out there, and we're going to run into them one way or another. There's no way that you can shelter yourself from all those because they come up from within. This idea, what is resistance? Well, it's that equal force, equal to our own, energy of love and energy of progress.
There's a balance to it.
There's a balance to the whole universe. That's what makes this interesting. Without the balance, there wouldn't even be free will.
Do you think that
without the resistance, we would be instantly enlightened like this.
Do you think that there's not a crushing? You know how people say, I'm overwhelmed all the time, or like, oh, I'm just crushed by this or whatever. Do you think that there's such a balance and such a symbiotic relationship between us as versions or energies that comprise the universe and the totality of the universe, that there is no pressure that's enough to crush people? Do you know what I mean? Or because we can get caught in the drama of it all.
Yeah.
It's all, I want you to know how hard I'm working. You know what I mean? I want you to know, oh, dude, it's tough for me. How was today? Oh, traffic, and then or whatever, like we all want to. And I'm wondering if that is a thing, if that's like a law of the universe that is immutable, that we cannot actually be crushed. There's nothing that we cannot overcome.
There is always, I think, a choice that we have.
There's a choice.
There's always a choice. And there's only one move that takes us out of the choice, and that's death. And so the Toltecs have a way
and we don't even really know about that.
And we don't know. And that probably just extends the game to another realm, right? So the Toltecs have a way of saying, death is our wisest advisor, because when everything is crashing around you, you can look to your death and say, have you touched me yet?
Yeah, it was for me.
And if not, then you still have choice. You still have fight as a warrior. You still have some way to choose. And I think, hearing these stories is obviously really inspirational to show, like, Ryan Holiday in his book Obstacle is the Way has a story about this guy who is a prisoner of war, and he was in the most horrible conditions, for many, many countless years, people around him dying, daily torture, etc. And his choice was he was going to, in his mind, play a round of golf every day on his favorite golf course, and he was going to go through and he was going to hit and just mentally play this round of golf, and it kept him sane, kept him alive. And then he busts out of there 20 years later, some ungodly amount, goes to that golf course, shoots par.
No.
Shoots par.
That's so good.
Yeah. So there's always that choice. And it can seem, it can get to the point where it's virtually impossible to choose that. But the one thing that no one can take from us is the universe that we create with our own mind. And so I think we always do have that. Now, is it, it can get to the point where it's real narrow. It's a very thin line that we have to able to choose, and but I think we always have that. I believe in free will.
That's what the faith is too, though.
Yep.
I think that a lot of people speak on faith and they miss the mark on what it is. I mean, because people don't want to do the work unless they can see the present at the end of the road.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want to see the gift that I'm going to get for the work that I'm going to do, as opposed to just being married to the work, and then opportunities are going to come, and you're going to be ready for when that opportunity comes because you've done the work.
Yeah.
But opportunities keep coming on this river of life.
Oh, yeah.
And so many people are ready. That's what I was going to say, too, about so many people aren't even present to the fact that, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be stuff that comes up. People think life happens to them. And it does, because they've decided it does. Mm-hmm. But that whole aspect about awareness is huge, because most people, more than half, I would probably say, don't decide that they're going to have a good day today. It depends on what happens to them throughout the day, on whether they're going to have, they're like, I'll tell you at the end of the day how good my day is going to be. And you think about what a disempowering kind of context that is to go through your day with. Like, hopefully I won't get pulled over today, and then I can say I have whatever the thing is, man.
Or these people will be nice to me, or this response will happen. We love surrendering our power over to these other things, because then we don't have responsibility. And if we don't have responsibility, we don't judge ourselves. I think so many things can be tracked back to the inner judge that beats us down emotionally, psychically, for failures to live up to this unrealistic ideal that we have of what we should be, what it means to be a man, what it means to be in this society. And so we, instead of dealing with the judge, we just shrug the responsibility. Not my fault. There's a bunch of shit happened today, or this thing happened, or
And
I
then
grew
you
up
surround
in
yourself with people that are kind of sycophants in a way,
right?
And that are like, no, of course I understand, like, and that's the
or commiserators, like fellow commiserators.
Exactly.
The same thing. Everybody shrugging their responsibility.
Yeah. And I don't want to call you on it and say that's bullshit, dude. You could have stood up and you could have done this,
right?
Because then you're going to call me on mine.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I guess I was maybe 20. And I started looking at that, and I go, there's parts of me that are blank spots that I don't see. I need you to call me on mine. I'm going to be very curt and straightforward with you about everything. Yeah. Because even if you're mad at me and you're like, hey, dude, well, you fucking did, I need to know that, man. Right. I need somebody to look at me critically, because I was in a bad spot, but like I needed critical thinking to amend my behaviors so that I could start behaving in a way that was going to move me towards life instead, you know?
Mm-hmm. So what was that?
What was that kind of thing?
Dark night of the soul for you? You've alluded to it now on the podcast.
Man, I don't know. There's a few. I mean, it's like a decade of it, you know. It was a long time, but for me at that point when I had that idea, I was in a halfway house, and I was the youngest kid there with a bunch of everybody was 15 to 40 years older than me that was there. Chronic recidivists, everybody's an ex-con and or on their way, and very low percentage rate of people that would survive through it. Like most people wouldn't be able to hang, or they would relapse. A couple people died while I was there, and there's just it was just like a really low bottom kind of joint, mm-hmm. And that's what I started looking at. I started looking at other people, and I go, where have they fallen down? Because I'm moving my feet the same way he's moving them, and he's 15 years older than me. Do I like his results? Because those will be my results. Right. I am the same as that. He's my canary down the mine shaft. You know.
If you want to watch the movie of your life, go watch his movie.
Right.
It's going to be the sequel.
In 15 years, you're there. If you don't like it, move your feet. And so I started to get really discerning about what I followed and who I followed, and I got super critical about how my feet were. If I move my feet like this, if I take this action, what will this result? I got really into cause and effect, I guess, mm-hmm. in a huge way.
Yeah.
You know?
And then that's kind of the art of seeing, you know, like really, I think that's another thing that just people don't see that anymore. They don't see cause and effect. They don't see people. Yeah. They don't see how their imprint affects other people. You become kind of blind. And I think that really allows people to do, I actually honestly I think there's very, very few like truly bad people.
Right.
You know, I think
there's people that are scared and fearful.
Yeah, scared and fearful. And there's, you know, most of the people doing bad shit, they have some justification mechanism in their head that allows them to still think that they're good. You know, like, oh, these people, these are the black people. They deserve this type of thing, or these are the stupid people, you know, so they deserve this. So they have this justification where ostensibly, yes, they're bad. They're doing bad things, but they're justifying it in a way that, no, I'm different and good in some way. Because I think we all are inherently good. We just have these delusions of the mind that allow us to do these things that are not bad.
There's like I think what happens is that you get if you're not careful, like one of the big things about the weekend with Tim and Blake was a sense of community. And so there's a lot of people that sign up for a course like that because they're scared. They're responding to something they've seen on the news or to the state of the world or something like that, right? And I come from a very different space than that. But watching it, and the one thing that came up was that, you know, the beautiful part is that there's a community here, and that there's all different factors that community. Not everybody's a sheepdog. Yeah. Not everybody's going to go and run towards the bullets. Yeah. But there are people that are, and if you know that this is what it is, and the more you know about what it takes and what it all is, meaning the more training and repetitions that you do to go, ooh, I'm really not that guy, or I really am, you get more knowledge about who you are in your community. And so then you can play your role in your community to the fullest extent. therefore you can satisfy your soul's desire, like whatever that might be. But if you don't really get in the game to find out, you don't really ever really know about what that looks like. And I think that that communal aspect is the hugest part. And I always think about, like, you know, when I was a kid and Exxon Valdez covered everything in oil all through Alaska, and I remember looking at ducks covered it, like you see all these images, right?
Yeah.
And we think we're dissimilar than the duck, you know, because we're in Texas or whatever. That's way over there. Whatever, I eat white-tailed deer or whatever. But it's like, to the extent that that duck is covered in oil, I am. Like, that's my food. That's part of nature. That's part of my whole environment on this earth. And that we get a disconnect to where we're not concerned about that is the problem. That's the whole thing. Even these videos that are going around right now, I've never clicked one, but I'm not really, I'm like, I got enough horrible shit in my head. Thanks, Facebook. But like like these people pass dolphins around to take pictures until the dolphins died and shit like that, right? I saw one today for a shark. I'm like, is this a new thing now where people are taking wildlife from the ocean? Like, but at any rate, the other thing is not only that those people, if that's true or whatever, that's wrong-headed, but it's also everybody looking at that going, these people are violent. It's like, you are those people also, to this extent that we are not dissimilar, you know, and what you say about accountability is so important.
That's the problem with all of this social justice bullshit. You know, it's like you're making another person who's equally worthy of love of anybody you're trying to protect, making them feel like shit, shaming them, making them feel horrible. You know, there's no justification for that, for protecting some other thing. Like, it has to be, you can't cure ignorance with more ignorance. You can't cure, you know, this lack of love with more shame and less love. You know, it's like, there's only one way to do it. There's only one way to reach out and do that with love. Like, it's the only fucking option. You know, but I think our brains weren't wired to care about more people than our tribe. And that's why, like,
that 150 number.
Yeah, that 150 number. Like, we're wired to care about a small amount of people, but now we're in this interconnected world.
How do we expand our consciousness to take?
So you got to do these quantum leaps of consciousness to really expand and see everybody as self, and that's the key thing. But I also think it's important to let's work with our biology and then cultivate that tribe. You know, get our 150. You know, and really have that support system, because that'll help things as well.
You can't fight. Like, I think that story you said when you're laying there and you're hearing, I'm nothing, I'm the gum on the shoe of nothing, and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I think about the impact that you make, which is tremendous, and just how, like, I understand the intonation of what you're saying, and then at the same time I see the fallacy of it, and you know, that whole. You can't get ahead of it. If everybody recycles, Dow Chemical's still going to pump dioxins into the fucking earth. Or there's going to be, in one day, whatever any major corporation is doing will completely override all the goodness that every human on the fucking planet does. For sure. You can't get ahead of that. But that's another disempowering context in that way. And so then I go, it gets too big for me, because then I get sad, and then I'm like, I don't want to do anything.
You're like,
all of it.
These idiots, what are you going to do? Fuck it.
And so I go, everybody I see today, I can change them.
Yeah.
And I can have a positive effect on the people that are around me, and I can make sure that my people are enriched, and I can look towards how I can make their life like. And then that's where it has to get bigger from. But all these other things, that's also a place of not taking responsibility. Mm-hmm. All the people that clamor about all the worldly problems, it's also a way that they can clamor about all the worldly problems that they can't solve or do anything about. So then they think that posting about it is something, but they can't do anything in their own families.
Yeah, I think the wisest thing, you know, again, that Don Howard says frequently says, in order to be of service, you have to be fit for service.
Right.
So, you know, everybody who's worried about all of this other stuff, focus that on yourself. You know, like, make sure that you're ready for service. Make sure that you're a hollow bone that can go out and not push your own shit onto other people and have them have to deal with your shit. Right. Take care of your shit first. And that way, when you go to somebody, you can go as a positive, beneficent force.
And it's also what I thought, like going to the sheepdog course, it came up again. I always think about that quote about it's the duty of every man to find his athletic prowess and to cultivate that and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I do think that is a society's duty, your duty as a citizen of society, to be adept at whether it's combat, scholastically, nutrition. Like you should be adept at these things, and we're just not, and we look to other people to take care of us. But to that end, I think that if we, when I get away from the those simple truths about like how can I make myself better, like you asked what was a defining moment in that way, or you know, the dark night of the soul kind of thing or whatever, but I don't know about like any one, you know, it's like bad Groundhog Day. Like, why do you change your life? Because it's like fucking boring. It's like Groundhog Day again and again and again.
It's gray.
Like the last time that I got loaded, it wasn't the worst, like, oh, this was horrible. It was like, and I watched shows like Bright Lights, Big City or something like that, and I'd be like, so you had a tough weekend? Like, whatever. Like, it was just, like, if people died around, well, whatever. It's not a big deal. But it was just like, the day after day drudgery, it just wears on you like erosion if you're a drug addict or an alcoholic, I think. But that being said, this guy, the part that was changing and that speaks to what you're saying is this guy helped me a lot, you know, and a lot of people did. But one guy in particular, and he says, you know, I said, I know I owe you, you know. I'm not an asshole. I get it. You've been super helpful to me. You invite me in your home, and nobody's doing that. And I said, I recognize that I owe you, you know, but I don't have anything. And he goes, you don't owe me, Tait. He goes, you owe everybody. And he says, and you're going to have to take a lifetime to pay him back. And what you're going to do is you're going to get as well as you can and be as able as you can and get as healthy as you can so you can help the guy coming behind you because people are going to need you. And that's kind of been my consciousness since then. And because I owe him, you know, and that's what I owe him. Is what he told me, and he's not here anymore. But like that becomes kind of the thing. And I think that what's the biggest aspect that's changed my life. I remember I was bouncing at this bar, and a good friend of mine, Donna Lee, that was the owner of the bar, and I thought, man, I need more money. I gotta do, you know, I had all these personal entreaties to the universe, right? And I was sitting at the bar afterwards. We cleaned everything up. And she's talking to her girlfriend, and she goes, God, I just don't know how we're going to make it this month. We're short a little bit, and the bar's in trouble, right? And I go, if this closes, I don't have a job. And she's having trouble. And I thought, if I make her more money, I'll make more money. And like, there's the first time I really got and put where the rubber met the road, and I go, I'm going to make it my full endeavor to make her more money. And then my life got way better. Just a simple switching of my consciousness in that way. And that was everything, you know? And so like the more, like that whole thing, people talk about a life of service and like, as if it's like some people should do, you know, if you're a coach or if you're a doctor or if you're a nurse or if you're a first responder, it's a life of service, you know? But not everybody does that. Like business people don't do that or sales people don't do that. I would argue that everybody should live a life of service, and your life will be not only for the best of the community, but do it in call it self-interested altruism.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That like if you want your life awesome,
you're part
be as
of the all.
Helpful as you can to everybody around you.
You got to be of service to yourself too.
Yeah.
You know, service
that's
to everybody.
That rest, right?
Yep.
To go ahead and go, oh, okay. Like that's part. If you want to be a bad motherfucker, you better be taking your rest. You know, or else you never recover.
Yeah, I mean that idea of altruism, I think the closer we get to that, you know, the happier that we generally become. When we direct our efforts not to some self-interest, but for the betterment of others, that's when I'm the happiest.
Yeah.
You know, that's when, because then you stop worrying about these delusions of the ego and these things that you're looking at. You're just like, hey, I'm a force. I'm a cause for an effect, and that effect is to raise human consciousness and happiness.
Yeah.
And when I can look at myself as that force, all of this other stuff goes away. It's just like I'm the wind and I'm moving the reeds.
Yep.
And, you know, you don't worry about that. You know, you just be the wind.
It's a cool thing too, the idea of like what's the best part of having money or something, and it's great. You get, if you like a nice fancy car, or you get, you know, new shoes or whatever the thing is, but like the very best thing about having extra money is that you can tip well and that you can buy things for other people. Like the best part about having money is giving it away, really, in that way, you know?
Yeah.
Is like that having the ability to be like, I'm okay, and I can share and make other people more okay too. And then to really build things to go, oh, I can help this happen so that they can build a whole life that is outside of me, and they're autonomous and they're empowerment.
It's just more fans to create more wind. It's just more energy. It's just more energy for the force. Well, Tait, this has been fucking beautiful, brother.
I love it, man. I love it.
We got to do this more often, man.
For sure.
Likewise.
For sure.
Likewise. Where can people find you, follow you, everything?
Well, my podcast that is erstwhile, I think it's 3 weeks old, was my last one I did with Arlen Sanford, who is a Krabi Kabrong master, and that's where I first learned stand-up fighting from. He founded the Dog Brothers, and that's Pirate Life Radio. You can find me there. And then Tait Fletcher, if you just search TaitFletcher, that's Instagram, Twitter, that's just my name, and Facebook. I'm all around. Easy to find.
Beautiful.
Oh, and Caveman Coffee is also a thing that I do with the lovely and genius Lacey Mackey and the lovely and genius Keith Jardine. And
the Dean of Beans.
CavemanCoffee.com.
We offer a special roasted on it, and you got some other great stuff, some fucking badass chocolates now too.
Well, we've been just going into everything. We've been,
awesome.
We've just been, and we've been really trying to focus on like that. That's the whole thing too. Is like, what do you do? How do you get success? Like, I don't know anything about the coffee business, but I go, you know what? Somebody else does, and I'm just as smart as that guy, so I can do that too. And then you go and you just try, and like you build those things. And so we throw our hat into this ring, and it's scary and it's daunting, and maybe it's going to be the end of everything or whatever. But you just go and you do it anyway, and you learn how while you're in the fire, man. And that has been the best way. And so I think if I could leave anybody with anything, is that do something scary every day. Do something that pressures you every day, and you'll build a tremendous life like that.
And lead with your heart.
Yeah, man.
You lead with your heart. People will receive that, even if other things are squirrely, and you lead with your heart.
Everybody thinks that it's biceps or something, or a stern look that makes the difference. And the truth, it's kindness, man. Kindness is the biggest power that you got.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, everybody. So much love. I'll be back again soon. We're doing this. Peace.
Rad, man. Thank you.
Yeah, brother. That was awesome, man.